Welcome everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's BID webinar in conversation, which is one of our new webinar series. We're going to make a start as people start to sign on, and I'll do some welcome and introductions, and Rachel will then talk us through how this webinar is going to work. So I'm Lisa, I'm the Chief Executive of Canterbury's Business Improvement District, and I'm going to host this webinar today together with our BID Board Chair, Clive Relf, who you can see hopefully on your screen. He's also a tax partner at Creston Reeves. We're also joined by Rachel Plard, who's our Marketing and Communications Manager. And our panelists today are Rachel Phillips, who's the General Manager of Boots in Canterbury. We've got Maxine Dawes, who's the Store Manager of Marks and Spencer. We've got Mark Stuart, who's the Whitefriars Centre Manager, and we're also joined today by the Fenwick team. So we've got Simon Youden, who's the Store Manager, and Pau Ribbans, who's the Operations Manager. And we're really looking forward to hearing from all of you. So thank you for joining us today. So during this webinar, our panelists are going to introduce themselves and give us a bit of background on their store. I'll then ask them a few questions about how they've adapted during lockdown and how they're preparing for more reopenings across the city, albeit that's later than I think we all expected after the weekend's announcements. We'll then have some time for a few of your questions, and Rachel's going to explain how that's going to work on Zoom in just a moment. But first, just a few things from me. There's undoubtedly a huge amount of information that our panelists can share that's probably more than we can fit into an hour and a half. So we'll try and pull out their top tips for you in the time that we have. And our hope is that today that this will help us as a city plan for recovery and more reopenings. Second thing I wanted to say is that we have been running a series of webinars since lockdown on everything from how the financial climate impacts us as individuals, to legal guidance, to digital marketing and video content. And these are available on our website if you've missed them, and that's canterburybid.co.uk. But this today is the first in our new In Conversation webinar series, where we're gathering groups of businesses together who can share their experiences, thoughts, ideas, concerns, so that your views are shared and taken forward as the city plans for recovery. And so we can feed that through as well to other decision makers like our local authorities, for example, some of whom will be on this webinar today. We have another webinar next week with retailers as well. That's Wednesday, the 3rd of June at 2 o'clock. And we're planning more webinars with business and professional services. We're doing one on tourism, sport and culture, food and beverage. So just keep an eye on our website, where you can also sign up to our e-news, so the details of all of this just come straight into your inbox. And the last thing from me, just a reminder that our annual conference and AGM is going virtual this year. So that will still be on Tuesday, the 9th of June at 2 o'clock. And we'll be joined by Professor Kathy Parker, who's the co-chair of the Institute of Place Management and also the BID Foundation. So she brings with her a lot of knowledge about what other towns and cities across the UK and around the world are doing and how they're coping with this crisis and the journey to recover. And she's she's also the research lead for the High Streets Task Force. So that kind of direct link into national government. And she's been leading a series of recovery webinars and podcasts. So we look forward to welcoming Kathy to Canterbury virtually and look forward to this webinar today. It's so nice to be able to engage with you in this way, even if we can't see you in person. Just going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk us through Zoom, and then back to me to move on to our panelists.
Thanks, Lisa. Lovely to see you all here today, and thank you very much for joining us. You're probably all Zoom pros by now, but if not, just to let you know that there is a panel at the bottom of your page, and you'll see that there is a Q&A, and that's where we'll be picking up all your questions to ask the panel. It'll either be myself or Lisa who will read them out for you. If we do find that your question, we need a little bit more information, we may unmute you. You're currently all muted, so we might be able to make that more of a conversation. But please do stick to the Q&A to ask any questions to the panelists. We do have a chat function, but that is really just if you have any technical issues and you need myself or Lisa to deal with that. So welcome to Zoom and to our session, and I will hand back to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Rachel. So I'm going to turn to the other Rachel on the panel today. That's Rachel Phillips from Boots. Rachel, could you just introduce yourself, a bit about who you are, your role at Boots, and the just the context nationally a bit with Boots?
Hi there, hopefully you can hear me. So my name's Rachel Phillips and I'm the General Manager. I've been in Canterbury about 1.5 years now. Previously to that, I've done various roles around the whole UK, 25 years in the West End and London. So always retail. Obviously quite a few of those were clothing retail, so I've got a big history in clothing retail. My store is classed as a flagship. We've got very different formats. So we've got our flagships, we've got our high street stores, we have our out of towns, and we have our local pharmacy stores. So it's quite a varied group of stores, as well as our travel stores, which are in airports and train stations. We have around 2,500 stores nationally in the UK, and we employ around 60,000 colleagues. Various different skill bases and various different roles, from obviously our sales advisors up to our pharmacy, our ACT, our care home managers, our pharmacists, and many more. It's been a challenging time, to say the least, but what we have done is we've tried to keep a local pharmacy available to every person in the UK open. And we've done that through various means. We have closed some businesses, so we have closed some of our travel businesses throughout this period. We've kept some of the high street stores, we've converted them to what we call dark stores, where we trade them only as pharmacy, and the rest of the retail is closed down, and we actually just use that as a .com dispensing and distribution centre. And then we've got the stores like me that have traded right the way through both retail and pharmacy, as well as obviously I've got a big care home unit, so we service 500 care homes, and we also have 500 patients weekly who are our most vulnerable patients within the Canterbury district that we pre-pack all their medicines for. So we are quite a huge pharmacy business within the Kent area.
And Rachel, how many staff do you employ in Canterbury?
So in Canterbury, total headcount when I have them in store is around 125.
Okay, and were any of those, did you furloughed during this period?
Yes. So we furloughed. The only colleagues that remained in the business were managers, our whole pharmacy team, so pharmacists, ACTs, pharmacy advisors, and our dispensers, our care home unit, but everyone else was furloughed.
You've all been busy.
We've been very busy. We're running the shop on 20 people at the minute.
Okay, right, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. We'll come back to you. I'll just finish with introductions. Maxine, I'm hoping you can hear us. I know it's tricky for everyone always to log on different devices, so we can't see you at the moment, but wondered if you could unmute yourself, or I can try that. Ah, there. I think Maxine, I think we should be able to hear you now. Can you say hello? We don't have Maxine yet. I'll work on, Rachel and I will work on that, but in the meantime, I'll just move on to Mark. Can we go to you? Just for a brief introduction, Mark. And I can see you're connecting to the audio.
Can you hear me okay now?
There we go. We got you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So they said, my name's Mark Stuart. I've been the Whitefriars Centre Manager for about 5 months now. So 3 months into my term, I had the great pleasure of furloughing my other 4 permanent employees here at Whitefriars. So it runs with a core staff of 5, 4 of whom are furloughed. We have about a dozen cleaners and 8 security officers who also work on site. And I've been rotating their furlough over the last 8 weeks. So proportionately, I've had about 40% of the staff on furlough at any one time. Obviously, we've got the main core shopping centre here, but we also have other buildings that surround the complex with offices, and we also have 39 residential properties that form part of Whitefriars as well. So it's quite diverse, with a diverse portfolio of tenants who all have slightly different needs. Some of those, like Rachel and Maxine, have been trading throughout as essential traders. So we've had the opportunity to evolve some of our thinking during this period of time. So it's not all sort of backloaded in terms of a return now. It's been quite an evolutionary process over the last 8 weeks. And certainly quite a challenge operating, like Rachel, on a significantly reduced headcount at this time. Is that okay? Any more for an intro?
No, that's great, Mark. Thank you. Really appreciate that. I was just trying to get Maxine on. I'll go back to helping her in just a minute, but can we move on to Simon and Paul from Fenwick? Now, slightly different for you because you haven't been open, but I know you've been having lots of conversations, and it would just be great to have an introduction from both of you about your roles, both now and previous roles as well. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Simon Youden. I'm the store director of Fenwick. I've been with the company now for just coming up to 9 months. 2 of those months I've been furloughed, so I just came back last week. So a very different sort of scenario for myself. I previously worked at Harrods, where I started as a porter and worked my way up to head of retail for luxury, moving on to general manager of Harvey Nichols in London, the Knightsbridge flagship, before taking up a post as deputy director of Bicester Village, looking after the luxury brands up there. As I said, I started in Fenwick just in September, late September. Fenwick as a group has 9 stores within its portfolio. The flagship is in Newcastle. We have also stores in York, Brent Cross, Colchester, Bracknell, Tunbridge Wells, and also Bond Street, which is, through its very demographic, is where most of our board of directors sit. We employ about 150 staff colleagues within Canterbury. That is including our concession partners as well. Our concessions number about 20 within the store. And we closed our store on the 19th of March. As I said, I've been furloughed, and Paul has been running the store for me, Pau Ribbans, the operations manager, and been reporting into our HR team, which have been running the stores nationally. We furloughed all our employees, as I said, except for the operations manager, Paul, and our maintenance manager. That's to allow us to keep proper services running, Legionnaires, checking for any leaks, and also for the security of the store and making sure escalators were running, plants were running, etc. So that's it from me.
Simon, thank you. Paul, is there anything you wanted to add? I think we've nearly got Maxine on as well. We're just having to switch to a different device for her.
No, just hello everyone. My name is Pau Ribbans. I'm the operations manager at Fenwick. I've worked for the company for 14 months now, and previous to that, I've spent 10 years in operations with Debenhams at various stores around Kent. As I say, as Simon said, I've been working at the store since the 19th of March, just to look after the general maintenance and mechanics of all the plant equipment and maintaining regulations for the store.
Lisa, while you're warming Maxine up, perhaps I could say a few words. So, hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you all, if you know what I mean, and thank you, Lisa, for organising this afternoon. So I'm Clive Relf, the chair of the bid, but also a tax partner at Preston Reeves. As Lisa said, we're in St Margaret Street, opposite where the new Slatters Hotel is being built, which is coming on quite nicely. We have 150 people normally, of whom we furloughed about 30, and everyone else is working from home. And we're very much looking forward to getting back into it, to be honest with you. We haven't yet got a date set, probably first week of July, but it might be towards the end of June, but it all sort of hangs on various things, as you might imagine. But very much looking forward to the contributions that our guests are going to make this afternoon. And Lisa, are we back with Maxine, or how are we doing?
We're nearly there, but what I think we'll do is go back to Rachel with our first question, and when Maxine comes on, we can introduce her then and bring her in, but we are getting there. So what we wanted to really hear from all of you about is how you've adapted and what your thoughts are going forward. So Rachel, if I could come back to you first. Just wondered if you could comment a bit more about how you've adapted in store. You talked about what's been operating since lockdown and how that's changed, but just looking at signage, queuing, touch screens, spatial distancing, all the kind of detailed operational things. How's that been working?
It's changed daily, to be honest with you, and I think that's probably would be my biggest share. Every day is very, very different, so you can't sort of just come in and expect to run your store the way you've previously done it, but also how you did it yesterday or the day before. So the first thing I would say is immediately we locked down the whole of retail when other stores were closing down, because our key priority was our patients. So we immediately locked down all of the retail, and our patients became priority because we knew we would be the last man standing to ensure medication was delivered daily, weekly, and whenever needed. Because we have got, like I say, a lot of vulnerable patients. So that was the first point of call. Then we adapted around our entrance points and exit points. We have got quite a challenged business in the sense of we've got 5 doors. And to manage 5 doors in and out can be quite challenging. So working with Mark and his team, we looked at various ways to manage that. And we are now in a position which we feel quite comfortable with, in the sense of we've got one entry point, one exit point. We traded the store with just a pharmacy to begin with and healthcare lines. And then we reopened the whole of the retail. And that was because we were being informed by our customers and our patients that the essential lines were different to what we thought were the essential lines. So we had to adapt the business to support what our patients and customers thought were their essential lines. So we did that, and that's worked quite well. We are managing the flow into the store, so we are only allowing 5 patients into the pharmacy at any one time. And then that's a 1 man in, 1 man out process. And as far as our retail business goes, for the essential shopping, we are allowing 10 to 15 customers in to our store at any one time. We are only opening self-checkouts and 1 man till, because we don't have the colleagues to manage or open any of the till points. And that's been greatly received by the customers. I think the one insight would be the customers are very adaptable as well. And as long as we're engaging with them and sharing with them what we're doing, they've been very supportive and get it. They do understand. Signage wise, we had some really quick graphics came in immediately to assist us with pharmacy. But the business has worked very hard over the last couple of weeks, and we've got a big, huge POS signage and social distancing package arriving within the next sort of week or 2. I think the other big thing I would say is communication. We are doing daily morning meetings, daily evening meetings, and that's with every colleague. That's with my cleaners, that's with my window cleaner, that's with my pharmacists, that's with my store colleague who's maybe answering the back door. And that would be the biggest share, again, that we've had, in the sense of keeping everyone informed, because the big change for us is one day you might have a colleague in front of you, and then the next day they're furloughed, or they are actually self-isolating, or God forbid, they go down with COVID. And we've had all of that. So you can't plan any day, because every day is just very, very different. So this morning, I walked in this morning, prime example, and I was 3 colleagues down immediately for various reasons. So we've had to readapt the whole business to do what we needed to do. I hope that answers some of the questions, Lisa.
That's incredible to hear about. It's been such an extraordinary journey. It's really helpful to hear the detail of it. Is there anything you'd comment on you think that hasn't worked so well? And then I also wanted to ask, I suppose, just a bit more about the response from customers and how they're behaving in the store. What you think your concerns are about that, or what you might want customers to know.
So what hasn't worked well? I suppose there's nothing jumping to mind what hasn't worked well. I suppose the big learn is how we've adapted as a team, and I suppose that's been a huge learn, that the team have come together. I'm very proud of them all, in the sense of their resilience, their care, and they want to be here as the last man standing for our patients. I suppose the most frustrating is that you can't plan. You plan to do a job, and you'll end up in somewhere else in the business, and you could be I can be dispensing or labeling or delivering, doing whatever I need to do to keep the business going. Patients and customers, if I'm honest with you, at the beginning, it was quite quite challenged the first 2 weeks, I would say, because people either didn't like what was happening or didn't want what was happening to happen, and really didn't understand the context. What I would say now is our patients and customers have absolutely got it on board. We still need to help them with the social distancing and the separation from us. And we still need to help them understand that. But overall, the majority, I've not had anyone, you get the bad language, you get the threatening behaviour, which is pretty normal in our trade, which is disappointing, but it's becoming less of, if I'm honest with you.
That's really helpful. So I think guidance for customers and repetition and really helps.
Yeah.
Maxine, you've joined us. I'm so thrilled. Thank you. Can we hear you?
Hopefully, yes. I'm not using any word equipment.
I'm going to come right back to you in a minute. We were just hearing, sorry, Rachel, just wanted to hear a few more things if we could. What support do you think is needed around the city centre? For example, safety, security, queue management, cleaning. What are your observations?
So obviously Mark's been fantastic. So I've seen Mark daily, and he's somebody who's obviously really approachable, and I'd encourage everyone to talk to each other, because we're all in this together. So what I would say is his visibility has been amazing. So it's helped me feel less lonely, because sometimes it can be quite lonely out there when you're the only retailer trading. And it's quite disturbing, because that's not what we're in the business for. We like lots of people in our shops, and we like to take lots of money. So it goes against every grain in our body that that is not the case. What I would say is, as far as what I would like to see, is us all working collectively as a Whitefriars team, that we are all communicating on a regular basis. And if this is the format, then I think that's really important. I do think we need to be very visual, in the sense of and I can see Mark with his graphic behind him, in the sense of our signage, our flow, and work together to make that happen. Because things that me and Mark have been talking about is, where do the queues go, how we're going to manage that, what about the groups, what about school children and the groups of school children, how we're going to manage all of that. So I think communication is going to be key. I think open and honesty with our customers, in the sense of the flow. And I think there will be some points where we've got to say, no, stop, close it down. We can't take this amount of people at some point. And I think we're all going to have to work with that. Apart from that, all I would say is cleaning standards are obviously paramount, because making sure our toilets, our washing facilities are open and running are paramount, because that is the best way to reduce the risk, the cleaning of hands, sanitizers, all of that sort of stuff in every store. And I know obviously Marks have been doing that, Tesco's are doing that, we're doing that, because that is really key. how you manage all of that, because that's an extra job that we don't really employ somebody to do historically. So that can be a full-time job. So you're having to readjust what your teams are doing and why they're doing it, which is a big learn for some people, because why do you need me in the business? Well, I need you to clean baskets all day, or manage cleaning products all day, whereas historically we've never done that. So there's a big learn around that. I think that would be it, if I'm honest with you, but Mark's been fantastic.
No, thank you for sharing all of that. In fact, I've been talking with Mark a lot too about how all of that works, not only within the shopping centre, but around the city centre, particularly as things start to open more and more, and the kind of consistency of messaging. So it's going to be really helpful to hear from all of you today. Maxine, welcome. So we've done introductions. I've explained who everyone is, and thank you very much for bearing with the tech and persevering. We're really pleased you could join us. So what we started with everyone giving a brief introduction, so who you are, what store you're from, how long you've been there, and just a little bit about the context of how many M&S stores there are throughout the UK, and how many people you employ in Canterbury, that sort of thing.
Yeah, great. I was able to listen to everything, so it was great. It's just the M&S technology is not as good perhaps as my personal stuff. So I've actually been in M&S for 32 years nearly now. I know I don't look that old, but 32 years, and in Canterbury for 18 months. I used to job share with another girl who went on mat leave just as this all started. So she went off mid-March. So I've been full-time from that point, which is the first time in 10 years that I've worked full-time. So that's been quite a challenge with 3 children. So obviously from the point of view of our portfolio as a company, clearly we have lots of different stores, but Canterbury is part of the South East region. So I used to be the 3rd biggest shop in the region. Bluewater is our flagship, Tunbridge Wells our 2nd, and then myself. But there's 19 stores on the region. So I've gone from being the 3rd biggest store on the region to the smallest. So all of our Simply Food formats are trading up on the ear and are now taking more than Canterbury, whether that be Whitstable, Maybrook, Warren Park down in Ashford. All of those stores are taking more money. So I think the biggest challenge for us has been just that fall from grace, really, and the disappointment. So I normally employ 200 people, and over half of them are furloughed. So I've probably got about 120 now on furlough, with 20 actually working in other stores. So we have got colleagues working in Dover, Maybrook, Whitstable, and Sittingbourne. So I think because they travel obviously to the store, it has been challenging for some people from a travel point of view, and therefore we've been helping them out. We're also clearly a business of 2 halves. So food is trading up on the ear, and actually, and I know this isn't Canterbury, but the area, Whitstable, Dover, they are all in the top stores in the country for performance on the year at the moment. So clearly the people in our area are kind of are voting with their feet and are still trading in M&S, which is great, just not in Canterbury High Street. Yeah, that's where we find ourselves. Food is trading up on the ear. Clearly, clothing and home, we were asked to close quite early on. We created a bit of a pop-up shop on the ground floor, and we have now extended to opening the whole of the ground floor. But luckily, we've also got .com business, which is obviously growing by the day. So that's where we are.
Maxine, thank you. I'll just carry on a bit if we could. I'm really grateful you were open on the ground floor, because my kids grow and they needed some clothes. And yeah, but it's interesting what Rachel was saying just about how customers behave in store. And you know, it's strange for everyone, even if we mean to do the right thing, figuring out how that works. I wonder if you could just comment on that, how it's been for customers in the store, how you've found that, and what the kind of journey has been through lockdown.
As I think it was Rachel said, it does change day by day. So at the very beginning, I think people were very grateful, very gracious, very polite, and very thoughtful, and it does change kind of daily. And so now we're at the point, I think, where people are getting, you know, slightly frustrated, and quite frankly rude at times. So yeah, it does change. We've obviously changed our in and out on the ground floor a few times, and our older customers have absolutely embraced that change and been quite lovely. Clearly we've manned our doors throughout this process. I think you've got an absolute spectrum of customers, and the biggest thing is to try and help the staff understand that. So at the beginning it was literally one person on their own shopping. We are now experiencing families, and a lot of my team are quite concerned that we're letting families of people into the store, and still probably have their own views that it should only be one person. We've had a lot of older people still continue to shop with us, and again, our staff have had a view that they should be self-isolating. The whole hand sanitizer bit is absolutely been key for us, although we've run out as of tomorrow morning, but we'll solve that. So ensuring customer safety is absolutely paramount, and what we've said to the team is you can only do what you can do. Some people don't respect that space, some people are over respectful of the space, and therefore you've got such a spectrum. It is quite difficult, but I think trying to get your own colleagues to not put their point of view over to a customer is probably the key learning that we've had as people's views have changed. Some people still ask permission to go and shop on Clothing and Home, which is really quite weird. And then some other customers have a view, should we be trading on Clothing and Home? So I think trying to educate colleagues to handle each person individually is key.
Okay, no, that's really, really helpful. I'm just bearing in mind everyone who's listening in, and just carrying on with staff. How have you had to adapt with staff in terms of risk assessment? Also related to that, wanted to ask about your thoughts related to transport to work and your staff getting to work, especially as things open up more, and maybe training for staff. How has that worked?
Oh gosh, I think the biggest thing that we're really lucky. I think our head office has been brilliant through this process, and I know everybody's different in a sense of that head office support, but asking for support is key. So asking the questions, have we got, can we do, is that okay? And talking to other kind of other stores that you've got maybe around the country or in the local area. And I think time with your colleagues, because we have got, clearly we closed our cafes, and our cafe team were the first to go onto foods. So training them on date rotation, and clearly that's not going to be the same for a lot of businesses, but date rotation, where products are on the sales floor, how to deal with a food customer, which is different from a cafe customer, and to buddy up people, obviously, so that they've got somebody to help. So I think our learning has been quite steep, but I think certainly from a management point of view, it's that understanding of people are putting themselves at risk, people are coming to work and are being really supportive of the company, and trying to make that link between what they're doing in a sense of being at work and feeding the nation, which is, you know, from a Tesco point of view is quite straightforward, but for other retailers it might not be. But as you've just said, customers need things from us, and it's trying to get our colleagues to understand how we keep them safe, but that why they're doing what they're doing and why they're coming to work, and trying to make that link back to the company even stronger, because I think that's quite important, understanding why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, we have all kinds of customers that come in and say, I need socks. Is that men's, kids, women's, sports? Still, men's, kids, women's, and talking to that customer and trying to find out what they need is takes a certain skill that perhaps retail colleagues haven't had to have, because customers know on the whole will come in and self-select. So I think learning and giving people time to understand that is quite key in retail, and that's a real change for colleagues who may well be quite fearful of coming back to work. So yeah, the other thing I think that's been really good for us, like you say about colleagues, we've got clothing and home people working on foods, we've got cafe people working on foods, we've got people that were only ever backstage working on food. So a real mix and a change. And what we won't do is let that go backwards, and make sure that actually that flexibility of people continues. We've always had it at Christmas where it's all hands to the deck, but I think we'll work a lot smarter now going forward. One of the big things we've got to think about is what happens when some of our furloughed colleagues do come back, because that is going to be quite challenging for them. Actually, for the people that have been at work, although it's hard, you've been in the thick of it, and therefore probably understand it a little bit better.
No, that's a good point, just about continued communication and training. Is just last question for now, is there anything that you think is needed around the city centre? I suppose particularly bearing in mind for you, you've got the St George's Street access as well.
What we haven't experienced so far is issues with queuing and issues with a lot of people coming through the store, because clearly the high street has been very quiet. And to be honest, I've quite enjoyed being the only retailer on the high street, and taking all of those customers. I think as more people come into the town, it is going to be difficult to maintain social distancing, but also stop there being trouble in the town, because as people come back out, I think we've seen, okay, social media has been quite warped at times, but we've seen people go to places and there be trouble because people have been not under house arrest, but clearly in isolation for a long time. And as those groups of people get back together, as tempers flare, I think what we're going to need is help in the high street from a security point of view, but just from other retailers, from the radios, just understanding and having more police, more security, more people, even our own management presence out on the high street, just walking around and understanding what's going on. We've started to see more groups of kids coming in, and more trouble than we had at the very beginning.
Okay, no, thank you. That's really helpful. A lot of these operational discussions with Canterbury City Council and Kent County Council are happening this week and have been for a little while, but I think getting towards decision making for all of us, and also how the Business Improvement District can help with all of that. So it's really good timing to hear this from all of you, and also to share it with all the attendees we have on today, so just fellow businesses around the city centre. So Maxine, thank you. We'll come back to you. I just wondered if I could move on to Mark Stuart, the Whitefriars Centre Manager. So you've also been working throughout all of this. What are your observations in terms of how the shopping centre has had to adapt throughout lockdown? How has that changed? What's worked, what hasn't?
I think both Maxine and Rachel have commented on the fact that it has been a journey over the last 8 weeks, and where we started and where we thought we were going to end up isn't where we are now, because the thinking has changed continuously. And I really liked the slogan that we went with for our sort of in-house marketing for social distance, because the whole keep calm and carry on, I think, has been really relevant for us. But we've had to roll with the punches, we've had to do things differently, we've had to think outside the box quite a lot. I think the key thing for us, we got the team engaged very early, and we continued that communication with them throughout. So I think the team would tell you here they feel part of the decision-making process, which has been quite interesting to get that thoughts from them, their fears, their concerns, what they think is right, and marry that with the over 1,000 pages of guidance I've received from my company and from other organisations over the last 8 weeks. And I think sometimes you take all the information you've got at hand, and you have to make the best decision that you feel is right for your staff, for your customers, and for your property. Within that 1,000 pages of documents that I've got, there's some things that, you know, later documents contradict earlier documents, the thinking's evolved, and you have to very much adapt it to the environment you're in. For us here, we're an open air shopping centre, and to some visitors to Canterbury, they might not actually recognise they've walked from a Whitefriars area into a council controlled area, into a street. So trying to enforce the type of social distancing measures here that are being adopted in, for example, Bluewater, could actually be really challenging, because the customers are free flowing from our space into other areas. So we've tried to introduce a soft sort of one-way system. We've got some floor directional signage going out over the next few days, which will assist with that, and to try and get the flow. And I think our thing's been to work with the staff and work with our customers to try and find the best fit. And Rachel commented earlier in terms of the doors, and we've had those configurations in 2 or 3 different ways now. I think we found something that works for Boots and hopefully works for the shopping centre. That will have to evolve again when other shops open up. And just to give an example, at the moment, Tesco, the queue for Tesco often goes in front of 5 other stores who all on the 15th are likely to be open. So we'll have to evolve our thinking again. So I think that flexibility, talking to staff, engaging customers out on the ground, really important. And I think just, trying to download all that information and make the best thing for your business, your space that you're looking at. And that's a challenge, perhaps a slightly different challenge than the retailers have. That actually I've got to try and take on board the views of many different types of businesses, who each business obviously is the most important thing. So I know for Maxine and for Rachel, their boxes will be the most important boxes in the city. And for my job now is to try and make sure that the whole thing works collectively. And Lisa, yourself, for the city with the council, you know, how we get that consistency. So when a customer comes to Canterbury, and we hope they come back in reasonable volumes, that we can manage that properly. They feel safe and comfortable. Staff feel safe coming to work here. So a lot to take in. And so we'll work with our tenants to try and make that work here. And obviously yourself and the council across the rest of the city trying to make that work and get that messaging really positive. You know, we're glad to see people back, but we want you to come and do it safely.
Yeah, I think that's just it. And someone commented earlier, it's so hard for all of us whose jobs it's been to drive footfall, and now we need to do that in a really safe and steady way. There's something you just alluded to that we haven't really touched on much, which is to do with accepting stock and deliveries. I wondered if you could touch on how that's gone in Whitefriars, and now I appreciate the loading areas are different there than on, you know, the medieval streets around the city centre, but some of that, and maybe Maxine and Rachel could comment as well, is just to do with how you manage that with staff. But Mark, if we could just start with you, what are your observations about that?
Again, I think we just have to be really flexible. Obviously the volumes we've been dealing with in Whitefriars have been massively lower. And the surrounding areas have been quieter. So I think there's been, up till now, quite easy access for people to come in and do what they need to do. And we've certainly shown a lot of flexibility with retailers who, some of them are, for example, they haven't been receiving deliveries, but they have been doing projects and replacing large bits of plant during this period of time. So we just tried to show a lot of sensible flexibility to what people are trying to do, and make sure. And that becomes a lot more difficult, I think, in 2 weeks when, you know, we've seen footfall increasing pretty steadily, 10% a week for the last 4 or 5 weeks. When people return en masse and more business opening, that does get a bit more challenging. So, for example, here in Whitefriars, you know, we've got our service areas and our lifts, and potentially where people used to jump in lifts together, they're not going to be able to. There'll be impacts on productivity for potentially moving stock around where we have to be a bit more careful. And businesses will just have to be understanding that, you know, we need to be more flexible. If it takes a bit longer to do it properly and safely, then that's what it takes.
Lisa,
I'm muted. Sorry.
Can I butt in briefly, Lisa? Thank you for that, Mark. So how many businesses do you expect will recommence in Whitefriars on the 15th of June, Mark?
I would suggest at the moment it would be most of our businesses. So a number had already given us an instruction that they were planning to open on the 1st of June. Obviously, Boris curveballed that one a little bit at the weekend. So I think most people now are ready to go. I think particularly the fashion retailers are desperate to get open and start trading through their spring stock. So I'm expecting the vast majority to open at some point in that first week, so from the 15th of June onwards.
And how does it work? Maxine was saying about the long queue outside Tesco. So as the manager of Whitefriars, is it your job to tell the Tesco people to queue somewhere else, or how does that work in practice?
We're going to work together on this. I think it's a really challenging subject, and I've spoken to a number of my centre manager colleagues on this. So in a closed centre where customers are coming in and they know they're in blue water, as an example, you can probably enforce slightly stricter guidelines and controls and a corporacy than we are able to do here, where we've got customers who are on St George's Street, where there'll potentially be very little control for footfall. Coming into an area, if we were too rigid, we could make it really challenging for people. So with Rachel, we've had a number of conversations about queues. We've got something that works for us at the minute, but when the footfall increases again, other stores are open, that may not work for us. We may have to adjust it again. Pete from Primark, who I think is on the call today, we've been exchanging emails this morning in terms of likely direction of queue. And I think we'll have our plan A, and what we're going to do and how we're going to work together. And the reality is I don't have the resource level to potentially manage 50 or 60 individual queues if we're capping headcount. So we'll have to work together to try and make the best fit that we possibly can. And then we have our contingency fallback plans that actually, what if we get overrun? And we've been looking at that. It's slightly, I think, easier in a store format because you can potentially stand at your front door and say, I'm sorry, we can't have any more people in the shop at the moment. It's much more challenging in a multi-entry, free-flowing shopping centre like the one we've got. So we have our contingencies and plans, which will be almost put up the barricades, to be a sort of last resort, and then we will try and control the volumes coming in. I don't think we'll get to that point, and hopefully we'll just be able to work with all the tenants to find a workable solution. But the first week of June is going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Simon and Paul, can we come to you now and hear a bit about Fenwick's plans for reopening and some of the thoughts, concerns and ideas that you've got?
Sure. I mean, it's really interesting hearing Rachel, Maxine, Mark's kind of comments, and actually really quite reassuring. Unfortunately, we've been closed, and what I was really picking up on there is kind of like the words flexibility, communication, engagement, reassurance, which is all the things that we have actually been working on, or particularly Paul, with the other operations managers within the group. For us, health and safety of our colleagues and our customers is absolute paramount, as is kind of like the reassurance. We have been in constant engagement with all our employees because our whole store has been furloughed, apart from 2 people. We use our internal Yammer communication, where we have 90% of our colleagues, 97% of our colleagues actually using that medium, and we can capture the rest of them through WhatsApp. So we're having regular communications which are going out from our CEO, from our HR on questions about furlough, because as everybody says, it's a moving feast. Every day is completely different. What we have started to look at is a succinct training pack to reassure, first and foremost, our colleagues who will be coming back in to prepare the store. And we aim to have those people back probably a couple of days before the 15th of June. We will have a pre-retail team in beforehand, just setting the signage, the one-way system that we will have. We have just one entrance, one exit. We are paying particular attention to sanitisers and cleanliness, and also how we are greeting the customers who are coming back in. A lot of them will be nervous, unsure, and we are putting in some hosts. We're not calling them marshals or security. We want to have a more softer approach to them. People who we will have trained in terms of engaging with customer situations and perhaps can diffuse them in a different way, unlike maybe a security guard could. I think that is a way that we want to go. We want to educate people around our one-way system within the store. We have to be very mindful of the quarantine of clothing. There's a 72-hour quarantine there. We want to ensure that when our colleagues, when they do get ready to trade, understand what the customer journey could look like as well. So it's a real engagement piece, and it's how that they can start to talk to the customers and reassure them about the products and whatever. We won't have fitting rooms open. We're debating toilets. We are debating groups, these school children, that did come up. We're looking, we have a furniture section as well, how we can safely trade a furniture section. Do we have like bed coverings, much like a car showroom when you get a service of a car? So there's every facet of that is being looked at. We also want to allay fears for kind of colleagues coming back. A lot of them have been off for a long time. We've got to be aware of their kind of mental well-being and their health. And it's a gradual move back into the store to bring them back. We're looking at reducing our hours, starting later, starting from 10 o'clock, just to allow people staff to get back into the store, find the route in. The park and ride, I still believe, is out for the next couple of months. Public transport, what are they doing about that? The cycle to work scheme, where could we park cycles safely? Can colleagues drive to council car parks perhaps? So a very, very large piece of work. And to back that up, a huge piece on a POS package, much like that Maxine was doing in Marks. It's really to completely, again, align and allay fears for customers coming into the store. So I think they are, for me, some of the really, really important points that we need to start to look to layer in. And it's really interesting to hear that we seem to be on the right track with with the other panelists, although we haven't had the I suppose benefit of being open or trading at all. We do hope that every colleague will be called. We did a survey with all the colleagues as well. A lot of them doing in-house training from home remotely, quizzes, gardening, all those sort of things, and linking in with various local charities, particularly around the NHS, and we've been doing cycle races and all sorts of things. So that's really kept the employees engaged. Really with what we're doing. And now there's noise about reopening. We're getting an awful lot of calls from colleagues excited to be back. We've unfurloughed a few more a couple of days ago, and just the looks on their faces as they came back in, they were just really happy to be back. And the productivity has kind of gone up. We've done so much as well within the store.
No, that's really encouraging. In fact, speaking of that, what you've done in the store, could you, apologies for the background noise there, but could you touch a little bit on how you've changed things in store, and is there going to be a certain direction of movement, signage? And I think we chatted briefly. I know some of the questions that have come up from some independent retailers are about, do we put up perspex screens? What about masks? Have you thought through any of these things?
Yeah, I'll do a little bit, and then maybe Paul could layer in with some of the detail. We have a one-way system, so the entrance will be right by Nero, and our exit will be right by Whitefriars. So a very simple one-way system. We'll have a host at the door to come in, and a host on the exit as well as having two roaming hosts on the ground floor to manage one in, one out of lifts using the escalators. To layer in with that as well, we have a very succinct signage package of floor talkers, banners, and educational pieces and hand sanitizers at certain stages around the store, so very easy to follow around. Each floor will have their own host to kind of greet the people and try and educate them. In terms of a visual perspective, we're looking to really try and create the lifestyle moment to avoid people touching too many products and trying to create a package, a lifestyle package, maybe a piece of furniture with you know, a fashion outfit, with a handbag, with a belt, with socks. So really looking to almost to do those one-stop shops. We have the difficulty is that restaurants won't be opening, and also with our concession partners as well. We do have some which won't be trading again into the future. Sadly, you know, they haven't gone into receivership. So there's a real big piece in terms of spacing the floor. As I mentioned, we've been talking a lot about training, and each staff will get a training pack, which will have some guidelines in there as well as details which we're layering on through the social media platforms. And also we have PPE equipment for all staff as well, including our concessions. So the business has decided that we go down to actually trading with masks. So we'll have masks for all employees if they want to wear them. And they're, again, one-way system and social distancing within our canteen as well. We will trade, I think it's with 15 tills, which will have protective screens, and they're being fitted this week as well. And we will have a separate till for returns, where we can bring back any fashion items. They can be quarantined for the 72 hours. We do believe that if you steam the clothing, that reduces the quarantine time to 36 hours. So there's ways and means we're looking at around that and really minimizing the amount of cash transactions we have within the store. Paul, do you want to layer anything more into that detail? I know we've got quite a short.
No, not really. I think you've covered most things. The only other things I had were we've got a foot pump sanitizer, which is going to be at the customer entrance, which will be for the customers to use as they enter the store. The idea around this is to help try to keep the product as healthy as we possibly can to avoid the quarantine scenario. And then just again, with PPE, we have allocated visors to everyone. Gloves will be available for everyone, although we won't be readily sort of giving those out. We're looking into stylus pens for our tills as another way to stop excess touch points on those sort of areas. We're also looking at, we've got quite a number of sanitising stations, back of house and front of house around the store. As I say, yes, we are putting 15 perspex screens in, and the movement around the store will be in a clockwise rotation as they enter through the St George's Street entrance. They will move around the store up towards cosmetics and around the back of the store in a clockwise rotation, and the exit will be on the Mac entrance back into Whitefriars. The only real challenge we've had around tills is around the cosmetics department with regards to obviously perspex screens on there are quite can be quite ineffective because a lot of those houses are very close together. So that is why we've opted for going down a visor route. But other than that, yeah, that's about where we are.
Simon and Paul, we've just had a few questions that I think are relevant because it's quite detailed questions just to pick up on now. One is, how are you monitoring the numbers in and out? When people...
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have set a limit. It's 200 within the store as a maximum limit. So their hosts will be monitoring that, and they'll be mic'd up so they can keep in contact, constant contact with each other, and we can manage that situation within the store.
Okay, and just to clarify, another question. Are you providing masks for staff, but it's up to the staff if they want to wear them? And what evidence have you seen that this is effective?
Okay, so the masks has been a business decision. They are being given to each and every colleague, and that will be their colleague. That will be their mask to retain. We feel it's an added form of protection, to reassure colleagues as well. And no, they don't have to wear them. That's again with the government guidelines. They don't have to wear the PPE equipment, but we will be treating them with their equipment as they come into the store and as they gradually return to work. Does that answer the questions?
No, thank you. That's really helpful. Oh, one other detail here. Do customers have to use the hand sanitizer before they come in, or is that an option?
Again, it's an option. It's there for reassurance. We will obviously encourage them to use it. You look at some of the various supermarkets, they do encourage you, they do have it there on a table. As I said, the hosts that we will have will be very much active and proactive in terms of managing the customer expectation. Would they like to use it? It'll be very clearly marked as well within the store with various guidelines as well, reminding customers as they traverse around the business.
I think that's really interesting in terms of, you know, what has to be done, but also what just helps with staff and customers feeling safe. And that's a conversation we've had around the city centre as well. I just wanted to pick up on that before we go into our Q&A with all of our panelists. So, you know, there are certain things we feel we need to do around the city centre, but also there are other things which just might make people feel better being in the city. Cleaning graffiti, putting up the hanging flower baskets. You know, we don't as a bid, and actually even as the police, have power to enforce the social distancing. But we could put up signage that is encouraging and has the right tone. I suppose picking up on your comment about hosts rather than marshals, just kind of that perception of being there to help people. And I think Rachel, Maxine and Mark, you've picked up on how there's such a wide range of customer experience. You know, it seems like the vast majority want to do the right thing, but there can be a little bit of confusion. And then there can be a bit of stress and impatience thrown into the mix. I suppose getting to my question for all of you who are you know, running businesses in the city, what would you like to see happen around the city centre? What do you think would be of most benefit? Some even things like transport to work. Simon, you've picked up on that. I'll start in the top with you again, Simon. Is there anything else that you, and then I'll just go around the screen before we open it up to questions. Is there anything else you think would help in terms of our discussions with the City Council and the County Council?
Well, I think first off, you know, an environment breeds like sort of happiness, contentment with people visiting the city. It's a beautiful city, you know, and if we can really show that we're open, that we're clean, I think that's really important. There's going to be obviously more security, more guards around. How are they acting? Are we doing linking in training together? You know, is there a one kind of like a guideline which we could all feed into? We can share best practice on that. Because sometimes, you know, we do need to be a little bit kind of more heavy-handed sometimes, because we do have some aggressive characters, but we also have some really nice people, regular people who want to visit the city and want to enjoy an environment they feel safe in. You know, just walking down Whitefriars today, there were loads of security guards, and that can be quite intimidating for people and for families sometimes. So there's certainly that piece. question, I suppose it's a question as well, is, you know, we want to avoid a mass rush coming into the city. If that happens, a lot of people, I think, are champing at the bit to spend money. I think on the other end of the spectrum, people have lost jobs as well, so we need to be mindful of that. Retailers, a lot of the fashion retailers have got a lot of seasonal stock to sell. You know, I personally don't want to go full on red sale in the windows, encouraging kind of a lot of people to kind of come in, but to try and be sensitive to the wider situation that the UK and indeed the world is experiencing, and to try and mute that somewhat. So I suppose that would be a question to what other retailers would actually be doing, and do we want to look like we're going into sale from a visual perspective in Canterbury? Yeah, that was really for me, and it was about the visual piece, you know, flowers, that sort of stuff, communication, visible hand sanitizer stations, perhaps. You know, I think there's a lot that we can learn from every form of business, from car dealerships, from B&Q to Waitrose to Marks and Sparks to, you know, to Boots. What they've done, if we can pull all that together and to try and be completely joined up, which I assume is, you know, the very core of what we're trying to do with these webinars.
That's great. Thank you. Maxine, is there anything in terms of the city centre, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of what you'd like to see? Oops, you're just on mute, like me.
Yeah, hi. I think there's some real difficulty in the town opening up, and I think what we have experienced is trying to make customers do a one-way trip around the store and go out the exits that you want them to go out is quite challenging. Probably more challenging for us because we've now got 3 entrances, obviously one entrance at the front, one at the foods, and then we ask everybody to exit via the cafe, which people don't always want to do. So I think that is a real challenge for lots of retailers, especially when you're on very tight numbers. It's great if you can have a host, but there's also lots of other jobs to be done, and therefore sometimes the pressure comes on those hosts to be doing more than one job. So I think that we need to be mindful of. I think the number of customers is also quite a challenge, and therefore I'd want all stores to be thinking about queue management, and how, because if we can get everybody kind of singing from the same hymn sheet as to one way and the number of people that are in the shop, then we'll all be in it together and all be trying to help customers have the same experience in every store that they go in. I think quarantine of product is really difficult, because although our fitting rooms aren't open, actually what is there to stop people trying on clothes, touching clothes, picking things up, etc. And in some of the smaller retailers that might be quite a challenge, and again might upset some of the colleagues that they are ending up then touching products that customers have tried on. So I think, you know, we're in the fortunate position of being quite big retailers, but some of the smaller ones, that could be quite a challenge. What I'd want from the town is I would want us to think about toilets and baby changing areas, because obviously our toilets will not be open. Our top floor will most definitely not be open anytime soon. And we are now experiencing people coming in who literally just say the word toilets, nothing else, just toilets. Now, I don't know what the council's provision is, but clearly they come to us because ours are free. So I don't know whether the council needs to look at something around toilets, and specifically baby changing. You know, somebody used my office the other day and that was absolutely fine. But we haven't really had to go there from a COVID point of view around those kind of areas, because they've all been closed. And I think as a town, more people mean that we will need more provision for those kind of things. And I think what Simon touched on there from a sale point of view is absolutely the case. We have obviously done a 50% sale with some of our profits going to the NHS, which is brilliant. But as retailers open up, we will all have a lot of stock to sell, which means that you are going to get people who all want a bargain. We see that now, even just with foods last thing at night, and where people do not accept social distancing. They think because it's a cheap product, i.e. food at the end of the day, that social distancing doesn't apply anymore. And I think that's just my kind of guidance to people, that that will become an issue as there is product and as there's bargains, especially in Fenwick, where you've got some nice property, nice products. My socks aren't quite as exciting, but where there are expensive things with big discounts, people fell out here over grapes the other day, so I can only imagine what it could be like in some of the retailers. So they're my kind of concerns, I think, for the town. From our point of view, just to say, we are going to open up the first floor, but like I say, the cafes on the top floor will not be open, but we will then start to get movement up to the first floor. But I am anticipating that we won't have the people to man the car park door, so I think that will be another debate. We'll see extra footfall down that staircase as the car park begins to reopen, because at the minute I am not intending to try and bring people in through that way, partly to try and help with my one-way process through the store as well.
Okay, Maxine, thank you. Rachel, I will come back to you. We've got quite a few questions come in, so I think we can, Rachel, if you have any more observations to add about what you'd like to see in the city centre, let's come on to that. We just had a question from a small retailer, really a question for everyone. What would your top advice tips be for small independent businesses in the city? Should they reopen soon too? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
My personal view is, of course, reopen, and I think that there are just a few things that you need to do. So limit the number of people in the store, try and provide masks, and if it's 2 or 3 people, certainly I know we could help out with those, and have hand sanitizer, because I think they're the things that really make a difference for customers. The guy across the road from us seems to have set himself up and have some plans in his shop over there. And I think it's trying to do local things, but open up and try, because we've got to get consumer confidence back.
I suppose the only other build I would have would be about how do you trade your store for you as an individual. So we're still closing at lunchtime, and that's purely to give my team some downtime. I know that's potentially easier because obviously we're driving the pharmacy, but we have reviewed our opening hours. We have closed down the store. We are still closing down the store between 12 and 1. And that means all my team absolutely get a break, get some downtime, and then can come back in for the afternoon shift. So that helps as well, where you're breaking the day.
Yeah, just to layer that, I think the hours, I think, are a really important consideration. And just in terms of trying to maintain that social distancing, 1, 2 people maximum in a shop, people will, for the mental well-being of all our fellow colleague retailers, it's a really good thing to try and open again. It's a good feeling, really is a good feeling. So I echo the other panelists.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I think what we're hearing throughout this webinar today is slowly, steadily, but let's reopen and invite people back in. Another question is, I wonder if there are any training documents which could be shared with smaller businesses, if they focus in general about retail safety. I know you'll have a lot of branded documents from headquarters, but I think there's been, Mark, I don't know if you can comment on this, there's been some public information from the British Retail Consortium and others. Is there anything public that you know of that we could share?
There's been so much over the last few weeks. I think we take the most recent relevant information. I can get our internal training across to you, and perhaps we do debrand that and make sure it's relevant to an individual business as opposed to a shopping centre. But there might be some key elements of there we could take, and might well be government resources available as well. So worth having a look at government website and seeing what's on there.
I mean, it's useful to hear what you as retailers find helpful. We've had a number of documents through from the Association of Town and City Management, who are in touch with the British Retail Consortium, also from the BID Foundation, and that's been helpful just to see what other retailers and other towns and cities are doing to prepare. So we'll troll through that, but it would be helpful to see the things that you have, Mark, and what you as retailers would recommend as well. Simon, were you going to comment?
I was just really going to say as well, be prepared, I think, for a little bit of a roller coaster of a ride. We could open and then close. You look at some of the big shopping centres, shops, boutiques in Italy and France. They've opened and they've been very successful, but then they've had another cluster outbreak and then they've closed again. So it's that's, again, it's a mindful piece. So we have to really be really steady, to your point, Lisa, about in terms of how we are starting to reopen for business. And we just shouldn't go gung-ho at it. I think that'd be the wrong way of doing it. And even from yesterday and today, the government is saying that they could be closing regions of the country if there does become another outbreak or another cluster. And I think when you look at the bigger cities, you know, I think that's going to be a much more of a challenge than some of kind of what we are in the region, in the regionals, if you like. There is more space, so we are lucky with that. That was really what I wanted to layer in.
Thank you, Simon. Rachel, were you going to come? No. There was another question. I'll just move on to this one, just about PPE for staff. So how, and this might be for you, Simon, how regularly will staff be getting new masks, just from a health and safety point of view? Should they be discarded after each customer interaction? What advice have you had about that?
The advice we've had that we'll be giving one out to everybody, and then they can actually be able to clean them as well. We have got stocks at the moment, and we will be enabled to get more stocks as well. Again, it's a bit of a moving feast and trying to get some of the clearer guidelines from the government. I think there's a new pack which came out on the 25th of May, which was working safely during COVID-19 in shops and branches. I presume everybody's seen that. That's kind of being updated almost daily now, I think. So there will be a piece where we will obviously provide if people want to wear them, that is. We can't force people, as our understanding, to actually be able to wear them at the moment.
Lisa, just on that one with my staff, the cleaners who we've asked to wear masks because they come into close contact with surfaces on a regular basis have generally preferred the sort of surgical disposable masks, and we haven't really limited it, but predominantly they're taking one for the morning, one for the afternoon. Whereas our security guards, who generally speaking can maintain a better social distance, but need to have something to hand should they have to get, potentially close to somebody, are preferring the washable, reusable black ones, which they keep in their pocket. We've issued each of them with 2 of those. And again, just went back to that engaging your team. My team didn't particularly want to wear the clear face visors. But when we talked about their fears about reopening the toilets and the intensive cleaning we'd have to do to be able to deliver that, that was one of the things they've asked for. So we went specifically and sourced that on the back of their fears about being in a very confined space with lots of people coming and going. So we've made sure we've sourced those before we reopen the public toilets.
That's very helpful. Thank
Lisa,
you.
could I, Mark was talking about sourcing materials. Are we able to help maybe payers with a sort of glossary of where they might go to get different bits of tackle they need?
Yeah, we've been looking at that, and there's some really good email groups amongst retailers and businesses looking at local sourcing and bulk buying. So we're starting to pull that together at the moment. That's been mainly around perspex screens, not so much PPE, but hand sanitizer as well. So in short, yes, we can do that, and we can just share the information that we've got.
So just sorry, Lisa. Just a bit of an insight from us in the sense of the masks and the PPE. So absolutely, again, the surgical masks, we're supporting colleagues who want to wear them once in the morning and change in the afternoon. But what we are finding, guys, is the visors, although are the Kylie look, as we say it, which is not the most endearing look at all, bless. But they are really helpful for our hard of hearing customers, for our customers who are maybe a bit older, but also in the sense of the care. You can see the mouth and you can see the eyes, so it's a lot more engaging with the visors on than a mask that can mask your voice, and also in the sense of not be as friendly or as caring with some of our patients. So that's the only build I would have on that.
Thank you. We've had a question which we might have touched on, but just in case there's anything else you as panelists would want to add. What measures, support or communication would you like to see from the local authority? I think we've touched on some of that in terms of toilets.
Could I ask Lisa, I know some of the car parks have been closed throughout the pandemic, haven't they? Are council car parks all back in operation in a couple of weeks' time? Do we know that? And somebody mentioned the park and ride isn't running. Do we know?
They've reopened some, and I keep anytime I hear from a business, and we proactively ask the question as well. We feed that back to the council. They have closed some in order to save on business rates, understandably, but can reopen them as the need arises. I've been monitoring what's been happening on the coast, and although that's different, wanting to go to the sea in the sunshine, it's perhaps an indication of what could happen in the city centre from the 15th of June onwards. So we've been having that conversation. Some are still closed, but they can be reopened. Park and ride is still closed, and a number of businesses have fed back their concern about staff getting to work. Simon, you touched on that in the beginning. What other measures could there be in terms of cycling and so on? And I think I'm aware that we're also waiting on KCC to make a decision about whether some streets will be pedestrianised. So it's a moving target, really. Rachel, sorry, you were going to come in there.
Yeah, I think there is probably a piece of work that we need to do with the local authority around schools and pupils for when the schools do return. And I'd ask for our support with that, in the sense of how do we work with the headmasters, headmistresses around and the bus station, around gangs of school kids coming in early doors, late evening, because that is going to happen. And I think we do need to work with the local schools and universities on what our tolerance will be, and what we don't want their uniform or their badge being exploited in that way to a degree. So I think there is a big piece of work there. Bikes, absolutely, there's nowhere to park bikes. And I've had that feedback from my colleagues already, in a safe and secure way. And it'd be good to get a bit of a timeline from the local authority on when things are opening, like buses, like the trains, like the park and ride, because it's all a bit up and down at the minute.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that away and follow up. We're also joined today by Peter Scott, the former Whitefriars Centre manager, who's going to ask a hard question of all of us, which is, retail pundits are all saying how retail will be changing completely again. Customer expectations, shopping habits, spend is all expected to change. How do you see that? Do you agree? Tough question.
So absolutely, I don't think the high street's going to be the same again. It's different already. We've got far less customers, but we've got bigger baskets. So our average transaction value is going up. I think the stores and the retail businesses that can take care of their colleagues and their customers in a safe environment will get that loyalty back. But I think if we don't do this in a slow and considered way to help people understand that it is different, we're going to have a second, a third and fourth wave. And I think that would just be horrendous.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment? I'll let you think on that.
Totally agree with that. I think it's going to be very challenging to start with. How do you manage what our budget is going to be? We're thinking probably as much as 70% down June. How does that layer on from there, and how do we get our confidence back? So yeah, I completely agree with what Rachel said. We need to be very, very cautious. I think retailers will change completely now. People have adapted. You look at some of the big online retailers, how does click and collect work? How can we do more of that? maintain that social distancing.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're obviously very lucky because we have got an online business, not as big as we would want it yet, but we have got an online business which has grown considerably during this time. And actually we've now got a process where stores can pick and support the distribution centre. So where stock is sitting in stores, it now means that we are picking and sending. So that has changed significantly. Our online business is growing, and certainly in kidswear, we are seeing a massive increase in online, where people clearly don't want to bring their children out to shopping centres. We've obviously gone live on Deliveroo, and I never thought as an M&S retailer we would have Deliveroo drivers every 10 seconds coming into our store. So we are doing anything up to 30 or 40 Deliveroo orders a day, and although the limit is £15 is the minimum order, we have seen people order a Colin the Caterpillar cake for delivery. So that just shows that things are, you know, they're paying £7 for the cake and £8 delivery charge. But it does show how things are changing, and certainly, you know, from our point of view, we go live in September with Ocado, our kind of joint venture, which has obviously been well publicised. So things are going to change significantly, but as a big player in the high street, that we clearly changed the face of retail by some of our customers moving online. But that is most definitely the way it's going. We clearly have 2 cafes, and the dwell time in those cafes is great. But we've lost a lot of that, which is clearly going to have a long-term impact in the town.
Thank you for that. I'm just aware of time. We have a few minutes left. Someone asked me a question, the point I was making about pedestrianisation of some roads. I'll just clarify that. Some national government guidance that came out encouraged local authorities to encourage locally walking and cycling, and potentially pedestrianisation of some roads. So our question to Kent County Council is, what are they going to do about that? Because we need to plan ahead. We've also had feedback from some businesses about how narrow the pavement is, and so when people do start to come back in, so I'm thinking Palace Street and Burgate in particular, how's it going to work there? Because already you see in some parts of the city people just walking into the street in order to social distance, which when you don't have as many cars is okay, but it's not gonna last. So really it's just a question that we're trying to get an answer to, so we can communicate with all of you and plan. But there's a lot, I think, around transport that's come up in this conversation. One final comment I'd like to, and Clive, you may want to jump in as well. I know this is going to be a long and challenging journey, and I know, as Peter and all of you have pointed out, everything is going to change. But I think it's important that we're realistic about that, but also to interject some rainbow into this. One comment is, I think over time the high street could have a resurgence as people get very fed up with the lack of social interaction. We need to consider the longer term how to make the high street and community interaction a positive feeling. That's come across in a lot of your comments as well, that we want this to be steady, safe, positive. We've been thinking a lot about what could we do on the street, possible extension of tables and chairs for food and beverage. What are markets going to look like without causing problems for footfall and queuing? What kind of positive space could we create in the city? We are looking at vinyling vacant units and putting out photos, for example, of all the things that didn't happen this year, like Pride, Canterbury, City Sound Project, medieval pageants. So we're looking into that now. But hoping that, you know, maybe next summer could be a do-over of the summer we didn't have and that we're not going to have, but, you know, in a different way, of course. So we will always be looking at positive ways to reach out to our community in Canterbury, and we know that's going to be hyper-local to begin with. We don't know what's going to happen with students quite yet. It'll be a bit of a mix, I expect. But looking ahead to next, you know, we need to get through what I think will be a difficult and challenging winter. But we also need to plan ahead. and work with our destination management organisations, Visit Canterbury, Visit Kent, and what can we do now to build for the future. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today, panellists and attendees. Thank you for your feedback. We're going to take so much of that away as we continue our conversations with the City Council and the County Council. So thank you. Clive, is there anything? Oh, you're back on mute, Clive. You've pulled a Lisa.
Yes, well, I'll get there eventually. No, thank you, Lisa, and thank you all our panelists for their sharing the information. I must admit, as a primarily an office-based worker, I think companies like ours have been quite fortunate. We get it quite easy compared to some of the practical issues that our panelists have to cope with over the coming weeks. And certainly I've learned a lot, and I'm sure we'll learn some more throughout the coming weeks, Lisa, as places reopen, but also as we have some further discussions with Canterbury businesses. So who are we talking with next week? We have some smaller retailers, don't we, next week?
Got some smaller retailers from around the city, actually, mostly Kings Mile, Cathedral Quarter, but a few others as well. So we're going to pick up that conversation as retailers prepare to reopen. So that's next week, Wednesday, the 3rd of June at 2 o'clock. Then we are moving on to office-based workers, so business professional services, different set of challenges and issues there. Also food and beverage, and we'll be running these once a week into June and July.
Very good. Yeah, well, thanks everybody, and thank you, Lisa. That was excellent.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you, see your names. Hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.